It's Halloween today. Many people around the world are going to be celebrating the dead. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to celebrate the living from the dead. That's right. We're going to be talking about the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to share my thoughts. Seems like we talk about the resurrection only at Easter time. I prefer to talk about the resurrection at least every other day, it seems like. You'll notice on my channels, I talk a lot about the resurrection. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, then feel free to stick around. Maybe you'll learn something different. Um, Feel free to share these videos. Feel free to leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching this video from, and we'll get started. What's interesting is obviously today is Halloween, October 31st. But tomorrow, November 1st, is traditionally called All Saints Day. You may not have heard of it. Maybe you've heard of it a little bit. It's not really talked about too much. But basically, this is a day set aside for Christians to remember the martyrs, to remember people that actually gave up their lives for Jesus Christ, whether they were persecuted to death, whether they were hung, whatever it was, however they died. That would be a day where we just remember what they did. It's kind of interesting. We don't celebrate it really in Western Canada. At least I've never heard of a place where it's like, hey, let's get together and celebrate All Saints Day. Let's celebrate all the saints that gave their lives for Jesus Christ. Instead, we get inundated with Halloween, getting chocolate bars, treats, sweets, and we celebrate the idea of wearing masks throughout the evening, and we celebrate the dead. There's all kinds of movies that people can go see, the Rocky Horror Show, all this kind of stuff. There's all kinds of traditions around the dead, and probably one of the greatest music videos that will probably be played all day long is Thriller. And don't get me wrong, I like that video. When I was a kid, when that video came out, I'm telling you, it was crazy, crazy. Michael Jackson, Thriller. It's all about the dead coming to life, being resurrected from the ground with no souls, just dead bodies. This is where we get the concept of the dead. And there's zombie movies out there, and none of them have souls. So they're just dead people walking around. So it's interesting that Hollywood has its version of the dead, and Christianity has another version of the dead. We will be resurrected from the dead state, if you will. Why? Because God is not a God of the dead. He's the God of the living. The devil is probably the God of the dead. He likes that. His job, his mission in life is to kill you. Why? Because he's hungry. He eats from the dust of the earth. That was his curse, to crawl on his belly for his entire life and eat from the dust of the earth. So he's constantly seeking whom he may destroy. That's his mission. That's what he does. And when we die, we ditch this body. Why? It's serpent food. We get a new heavenly body. This turns back to dust. So let's dive into, before I go down that rabbit hole, let's go into the crucifixion. So we start off in Matthew 26. This is where Jesus is praying in Gethsemane. Then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and said unto the disciples, Sit ye here while I go and pray yonder. And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, James and John, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. And he saith unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here and watch with me. Keep watch, keep awake. And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And he cometh unto the disciples, and findeth them asleep, and saith unto them, Peter, what? Could ye not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that ye enter not into temptation. That the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. It's interesting that he asks Peter not to be entered into temptation. Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. That's interesting. And their eyes were heavy. Actually, he found them asleep, like they went to sleep. So almost like another day at the office with Jesus Christ, our King, our ruler. Man, he's going to restore Israel. He's going to take these Romans out of here. Can't wait. In fact, I might even have a dream about it. I'm sure that's what his disciples were thinking about, because anytime he mentioned that he was going to Jerusalem to die, it just wouldn't register. We get the benefit of that because we could read all four Gospels. But to the disciples, that wasn't registering. They have their king. They just finished a triumphant entry into Jerusalem, and it was all his disciples that laid their cloaks at his feet while he was on a colt. It's kind of interesting. Then when he rode in, it was his disciples that laid their cloaks at his feet. And they had palm trees and all kinds of stuff, because people are saying, well, how could they, the next week, how could they kill Jesus? You know, how fickle are these people? But it was his disciples that ushered him into Jerusalem, because all of Jerusalem was in a bit of an uproar, and they're like, what does this mean? And they're like, this is Jesus of Nazareth. This is the king. So his disciples, he had hundreds and hundreds of disciples, not just 12. He had 12 apostles. He had hundreds of disciples, which is interesting. We kind of forget that part. So they're asleep, and he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. They just couldn't stay awake. And I tell you what, if you've ever been in that situation where you're trying to fight sleep, if you're driving long distance, it is the worst thing. It feels so good just to close your eyes and go to sleep while you're driving. And you think, oh, I'm just going to close my eyes I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Open my eyes and then close them. 1, 2, 3. And before you know it, you hit the ditch. It's like your mind plays tricks on you. I used to drive long distances. It's painful. I would drive one night. I would leave work at 6 o'clock at night to go and see my fiance, which is my wife today. And I would get there at 6 o'clock. I'd get to her place, her parents' place on the farm, at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I would drive all night after work, after doing construction. And as soon as I would leave town, which is Fort McMurray, I would be tired. And that was death row. That road, the first hour out of McMurray, there's so many accidents because I think so many people would try and leave McMurray after a shift, a long shift. So many people died on that road. There's only 2 lanes back then. Thousands of people every day coming and going from Fort McMurray. So I would do this like 19 years old, 20 years old, and I would fall asleep or get very tired as soon as I would leave McMurray. And I have 11 hours, 50 minutes left to drive. And I'm driving at the worst time, which is at night. And sometimes I would drive in a snowstorm and I'd shake my head. I'd turn up the music. I'd stick my head out the window. I'd yell. I'd scream in the vehicle at the top of my lungs to stay awake. And then the next second, I'd be like, oh, I got to pull over. So bad, so painful. So his disciples are basically doing this. They're falling asleep every time. They're like looking at him, trying to keep their eyes awake. And then he'd leave and go pray. And then they'd crash. Then the third time he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then cometh he to his disciples and saith unto them, sleep on now and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doth betray me. So imagine being sleepy and all of a sudden Jesus gets arrested right in front of you. And then, so the instinct for Peter was to take out his sword and cut off one of the servants' ears. It's just an adrenaline rush. It's like all these people are gathering around Jesus to take him, and you've been asleep. Right away, you pull your sword and you cut the ear. And then, of course, we get to the part where Peter denies Jesus 3 times. We get the remorse of Judah. He gives back the 30 pieces of silver, throws it back at them, and then goes and hangs himself. Then Jesus appears before Pilate, and then he wants to let them go, but the crowd says no, like, we have no king, basically. Caesar is our king. Caesar is our leader. We reject this king. And Pilate kept saying, why? What has he done? So, verse 24, Matthew 27, verse 24, when Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, so there was going to be a riot, he took water, washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this person. See you to it. Then answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and on our children. Then released he Barabbas, who was a murderer and a solicitor and a thief. So he released Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. And what's interesting is Jesus said to the people that were going to arrest him is, why are you here with staves, sticks, if you will, to arrest me like a thief? And I think the devil realized what he was doing, treating Jesus like a thief, because to the devil, Jesus was trying to steal his kingdom away, his kingdom on earth, because Adam handed it over to Satan, and Satan was reigning on earth, and he thought if he could kill Jesus, he would continue to reign on earth, not really understanding the whole purpose of Jesus dying on the cross. So to add insult to injury, they freed Barabbas, who was a murderer and a thief, and they put Jesus in his place between 2 thieves. Then he released Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus to the common hall, gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers, and they stripped him and put on him a scarlet robe. And when they had planted a crown of thorns, They put it upon his head and a reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." And they spit on him and took the reed, which is a staff, and smote him on the head. This is the same type of a stick that Moses used when he struck the rock twice. And he was not allowed to go into the promised land. Why? Because of unbelief. He didn't believe, he didn't trust when God told him to speak to the rock. Instead, he struck it twice in anger. This is the same anger that these people are using on Jesus. This isn't just an ordinary reed, like something that bends so easy. This is a staff, just another way to say it. And think of a baseball bat, basically. So when they struck him in the head, guaranteed Jesus was concussed right out of the gate. And they grabbed him. Before this, we didn't even talk about the leaders of Israel actually grabbed him. They put a blindfold over him and then started striking him with the palm of their fist, asking him to prophesy who was it that hit them. Very reminiscent of Jeremiah when Jeremiah would do that. I think there was another prophet as well. Prophesy which way did you get hit? Like just pure mocking. But they didn't want to watch his reaction to being struck. So instead they put a cover over his face so that they wouldn't be as guilty or feel as guilty because they don't see his face. So probably in their eyes, they're not really striking him because they're striking the cloth that was over his face. And they're punching him over and over again. And there are, I think it's in Isaiah 53 where it talks about they actually plucked his beard. As in they were so angry that they grabbed at his beard and probably face to face like this and then ripped his beard and then put a cloth over his head and started striking him. Then they brought him to Pilate. Then Pilate presented Jesus and they almost didn't recognize him. He was beat up so bad. And if you've ever watched a UFC fight where some people take a beating, their face swells up afterwards so much that you can't even tell who they are if they were to walk by you. That's how bad Jesus was. So they put a scarlet robe on him, and it's interesting that it mentions a scarlet robe here. I think it's a purple robe in Mark, then a scarlet in the other two, I think. I think I'd have to look it up again. But anyways, they platted a crown of thorns, mocking him with a crown of thorns. Some people say, depending who you talk to or which scholars you read articles from, these spikes were probably like this, at least 2-3 inches, maybe more. And so they would make it stick to his head, and then they'd beat him, and then they'd rip it off of his head. So just abuse, and he never said a thing while they were doing this. They mocked him, they knelt before him, "Hail, King of the Jews," and they spit on him. I don't know if you've ever been spit on. I can't recall, unless when you're like a kid and kids would do that, but I don't recall ever being spat on with pure hatred after getting my beard plucked, after getting hit by a baseball bat, after a crown of thorns being put on me, a cover over my face while they're punching me. "All hail, King of the Jews." And they spit on him and took the reed and smote him on the head. And after they mocked him, they took the robe off of him and put his own raiment on him and led him away to crucify him. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name, and compelled him to bear the cross. Now, traditionally, this is where Jesus fell down on one knee because of the weight of the cross. And some people suggest that this is where he dislocated his shoulder and couldn't carry the cross anymore. So they got Simon to carry the cross, who was following behind. And when they were come unto the place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of the skull, they gave him vinegar to drink, mingled with gall, and when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. So he was thirsty, and they gave him basically vinegar mixed with wine, I think it was. Which tasted bad, tasted horrible, but he was thirsty for water. So they probably, over the last 24 hours, he probably hadn't had one drop of water while he's standing the whole time. They're not letting him sleep. They're not giving him a nap. They're not letting him rest. He's already been awake all day long. So this is now day 2 of him being awake. And he's thirsty now. And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and among my vesture they cast lots, and sitting down, they watched him there. You might be curious, how long did they sit down and watch Jesus for? An hour? 2 hours? 3 hours? 4 hours? 5 hours? 6 hours? They watched Jesus Christ suffer on the cross. They could hear him take his last breath. Every time he tried to push himself up on the cross because of a dislocation in his shoulder to breathe, and he's thirsty, probably his tongue was stuck to the top of his mouth, could hardly breathe. Concussed, in pain, bleeding, most likely because of the crown of thorns that they ripped off of his head. I don't know if they took it off actually, or if they kept it on his head. I assume, like with all the images that we have, that the crown of thorns stayed on his head. Either way, he'd be bleeding quite a bit. Crazy, right? Sitting down, they watched him for basically 6 hours and set up over his head his accusation written. And this is the worst thing. This, above all things, this was his accusation. This is why he was killed. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Then there were 2 thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and the other on the left. And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads, almost like in disgust, like, look at this guy. Spitting, shaking their fingers at him, wagging their heads, and saying, "Thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days." So they were people that were there when Jesus said, "If you destroy this temple, I will build it in 3 days." Talking about his own body, talking about his own resurrection. And they're mocking him. And thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. As in, take yourself off of that cross, peel your hands away from the nails, peel your feet away, come down from the cross. Likewise, also the chief priests, mocking him with the scribes and elders. So this is all of Israel, basically. All the representation of Israel, said he saved others from what? From death. Don't think they're thinking about Lazarus as well. Himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. So they're choosing not to believe him. They're choosing not to. They said, if you come down, then we'll believe. He trusted in God. Let him, who? That's God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. Basically saying, if God will take this guy, if God will take his son, let him deliver him. Let him deliver him now. So basically, they're mocking God at the same time. They never believed that he was the Son of God. And they're like, okay, if your God wants you now, he can take you. He can have you now. The thieves also, which were crucified with him, cast the same in his teeth. And obviously there's another version where we get an inside look as to what the conversation was between these two thieves. Now, from the 6th hour, there was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? A quote from King David from a psalm. Some of them that stood there, when they heard that, said, This man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink. The rest said, Hey, don't do that. Hey, come here. What are you doing? Don't give him any vinegar. Let's just watch what happens. Let's just watch. Come on, guys. Don't do anything. I know he's crying out for thirst. Let's just watch. Let's just sit here and watch. This is good. This is fun, guys. Let's just see what happens to him. Let's see if Elias will come and rescue him. Let's see if God will pull him off the cross. Don't help him. Come on, just sit here beside me. The rest said, Let be. Let us see whether Elias will come to save him. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. That's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see him die. And whenever he'd cry out and say, I thirst, a guy would go and take some vinegar on a sponge and go to give it to Jesus. And they're like, no. Hey, come here. Let's just watch. Let's watch this guy suffer. Let's see what happens. So he yielded up the ghost, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from top to bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into a holy city and appeared unto many. Which is interesting that the graves were open. This, to me, is a fulfillment of Ezekiel 37, because Ezekiel was prophesying over the dry bones. And he said, Can these bones live? And basically, he prophesied that one day God would open the graves and bring these people back into their land. Who is that? It's everybody that believes that Jesus Christ is their king. That's who's coming back one day to touch down into the Mount of Olives. And we're going to reign with him also, not only in heaven, as we have a seat in heavenly places, but we're going to reign with him on earth for 1,000 years as well, with all those people that refused the mark of the beast during Jacob's trouble, during the 7-year tribulation. All those that refused the mark of the beast and died and were beheaded and were executed, they get to reign with Christ for 1,000 years. No one else gets to come into that kingdom for 1,000 years. And then at the end of the 1,000 years, you get the Ezekiel war, which I've talked about in other videos. Because during the tribulation, you need to get rid of the Antichrist and the false prophet. That's the war of Armageddon. That is Christ coming down and fighting his enemies with his angels and with his saints. They're fighting for Jerusalem. And when I say fighting because Jesus is going to reign for 1,000 years, and anybody, Jew or Gentile, Greek or barbarian, Palestinian, whoever comes against Jesus Christ will be killed. Why? Because he's going to be defended by his angels, because he's getting his territory back. That land belongs to God himself, Jesus Christ. It's not anyone else's land. It's not anyone else's right. to be there, but only Jesus and all those that he gathers personally from the corners of the earth, from the utmost parts of heaven, to live and reign with him for 1,000 years. It's who he picks. If you don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, if you don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, you're not reigning with him. Instead, there's a good chance you're going to be killed by either Jesus himself with his basically flaming mouth, if you will, just by speaking a word, or his angels, or his saints with their immortal bodies going throughout Jerusalem, spreading out, taking anyone that comes against Jesus Christ, taking them away, killing them. That's what it is. This is basically the marriage supper of the Lamb, feasting on all those that come against Jesus Christ. This is why every tribe will mourn. They will see the one that they pierced. This is a dreadful day. This is a horrible day. This is a terrible day. Why? Because vengeance is going to be taking place. God's vengeance. This is not Jesus carrying a lamb and letting everyone pet the lamb. This is a day that is terrible. And people will be running for their lives, begging that the rocks would cover them. Fearful. Who are they fearing? God the Son is who they're fearing. They see him in his power, in his majesty. This isn't the rapture. This is God's wrath coming down and executing justice. And he will have his reward for everyone that does evil, wicked. So there you go. Happy Halloween. I know people are going to be, it's interesting that when you have Halloween, people are buying costumes and stuff. And it's interesting because you wear a costume for an evening and then you shed that costume the next day and you're back to yourself. But it's almost like symbolic in some ways of ditching this body, this fleshly body, and people dress up like vampires, ghosts, celebrities, all kinds of stuff. And when you think about celebrities, they wear masks every single day. Because if you were to visit a celebrity and talk to a real celebrity in real life, you wouldn't recognize them. You'd be like, wow, they're just like us. They're human beings. They cuss, they swear, whatever it is. And they're not like their movies. It's weird. Well, it's because they wear a mask their whole lives. They act. So today they're going to be celebrating all over the world the Day of the Dead, basically. Tomorrow is All Saints Day. And I'd be interested to know how many people will actually sit back and reflect on all the people that gave their lives, including the first handful of Jews that decided to reach out to the Gentiles. And we are forever grateful for Paul, for Peter, for Barnabas, for Timothy, for all the other Jews that actually reached out to the Gentiles, not just to the Jews, but to the Gentiles. This is a Jewish religion. This came out from the Jews. Jesus was a Jew. This is not a Western religion. So people fail to realize. They think, oh, this is just a Western religion. This came from the Jews. It was passed on to the Gentiles. Anyways, something to think about. I hope you learned something. I hope you got something out of this little video. I just finished reading the book of Matthew yesterday, so I thought it'd be cool to talk about the crucifixion today, because most people's minds will be either fixated on the war in Israel, or they'll turn off the channel and instead celebrate Halloween. Instead, they'll celebrate the dead. They'll watch movies about the dead. they'll watch horror movies with popcorn and pop and all this stuff, and they may or may not even think about Jesus Christ and what he did on a cross for us to save us for all eternity. So that's why I thought I would make this video. It goes against the grain of what people are thinking about today. But I hope you think about what Jesus Christ did for us. I hope you think about the resurrection. And I'll be making more videos like this talking about what he's actually done for us. I'll talk about the Millennium Kingdom, all kinds of stuff. So again, thanks for watching. If you like this kind of thing, again, if you've made it this far, please subscribe to this channel. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know where you're watching these videos from. I get people from all over the world watching this video. I'm not kidding. All over the world. South Korea, from Ireland, from England, from France, all over the world, which is quite humbling. The majority are Americans, probably 60-70% are Americans, my American audience, then Canada, and then the rest of the world. Get people from Hawaii, from Mexico, all over the place. People are going on holidays and they decide to take a little bit of a break and watch my channel instead of watching the news or watching people being gunned down in Israel, in Palestine, in Gaza, or instead of watching the war that's going on in Ukraine. Sometimes people just like a little bit of a break and talk about something else. So hopefully I am that channel for those people that are war fatigued and maybe they don't understand what's going on right now and they're a little bit confused. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of hope as well, that it's real simple to believe in Christ. It's real simple today. This is the easiest time to come to Christ right now. And all you have to do is believe that he is the Son of God. Believe that he died on the cross, like we just shared, and he rose again on the third day. And he is alive forever. He will never die again. And we don't have to die either anymore. We don't have to taste death. Why? He tasted death for us on the cross. The second our bodies kick out of here, we are going straight to heaven. That's why we believe in a resurrection. The resurrection is the center to our faith in Jesus Christ. I can go on and on, but thanks again for watching. I really appreciate you guys. And I got to take off to work. See you guys. Bye.